Hi, I'm Eric.
And I'm Aurora,
We're cousins. This is the Family Retort.
and we're bringing our dinner side conversations to you.
Yes, and this is actually a pretty good dinner side conversation from what you told me.
Yeah, I thought it'd be fun to talk about family values. We have so many family holidays coming up, so I thought it'd be mildly relevant. And I think that it's interesting to discuss what you consider family values because you talk a lot about how in media you search for figures that you think embody family values. And I wanted to know what that meant to you and what how you know those figures embody that and like why.
So, just like an example of, okay, well, I kind of adhere more to the traditional nuclear family values, where you have two members. I don't want to say, a wife and a husband anymore because that definition has kind of changed. But I think that you and another partner generally along with kids. If you want kids, if you don't want kids, that's fine too. But there's certain like core concepts that I like that really embody that. One of the big
Okay.
ones is like a sense of community, right?
I think sense of community is extremely important. I agree.
And I think in recent years we have lost a lot of that, and it has really affected, you know, our youth in general, and just people in general. They don't trust their neighbors. They don't know their neighbors. I mean, where I live, we know pretty much everybody on our street. I'm
That is an extremely awesome privilege to have. I'm really excited because one of my friends moved into my building. So it's nice to have like one neighbor that I like know.
Yeah, and I've done the flip side though. So I have been in apartments. I've been in apartments for a long time, and it was only recently that we moved into a house, and then we ended up buying the house. But up to that point, I totally get the rotating door of neighbors. You don't really want to talk to them. Maybe somebody is shady,
Well,
but
how long have you been in your house?
we've been in here for about 2 years and some change.
What's the longest you've ever lived in an apartment? Like one
Uh,
single apartment?
oh wow, that's a good question. Well, here's the thing. I was military,
Oh, that
so
definitely ruins your stats.
yeah, I would say year maybe in an apartment. Then I moved to California, and in California we bought a house because I didn't want to do the whole moving all the time. I didn't want to stay on base. The military was paying you, so I figured it's about. Oop, hold on. I have to sneeze. Maybe not. Okay. So the military paid you, so I figured why, give that to somebody else when I can just be investing that money into a house, right?
Hmm.
And
Inequity.
the amount they gave us was, enough to cover a percentage of it. Not everything, but enough. So, but even then, the first time I moved into a house, it was not the best area. And it's not like we didn't talk to our neighbors, but
Well, so
uh,
I asked because um I have lived in my apartment for quite a long time. And the reason I'm able to stay in my apartment for so long is because my rent has more or less been stabilized because in Seattle,
you have like a
housing that
renter's
is
cap.
housing that is older, they can't increase your rent by more than 10%. It can still be a lot and it still kind of sucks. My rent has only increased, maybe two-ish times in the 7 years that I've lived here. I've lived
That's
in
not
my
bad.
apartment for 7 years. I've lived in my neighborhood for much longer, much, much longer. You know, I
Yeah.
I was in my neighborhood in high school, so there's probably like 12 years in this neighborhood in general, and I lived in another apartment 2 blocks away from here before I moved into this building. So I really like my neighborhood and I care about my neighborhood. And I don't think that apartments necessarily mean transients. I think what makes people transient is their jobs and housing stability, like people who hike up the rent and other stuff like that. So, apartment renting gives you mobility, but I don't think it's like a housing versus apartments type of thing. But I do understand what you mean about being invested in your community and caring about it. There's a
Yeah.
book that I really like by Jane Jacobs about the death and life of American cities. And she kind of talks about what you need to build a vibrant community in a city. And one of those things is people who are there for a long time.
Well, yeah, and it's not just that, but you also need people who care about your area too. Um, and I'm going to talk a little shit to apartment people, no offense, but people who rent, I feel just don't have as much invested, right? They don't own the place. They're not trying to make it improve, any kind of
Well,
improvements. They just
they're not allowed to make improvements, right? Like they're de-incentivized. I mean,
sometimes.
I have accepted that I'm not going to get my security deposit back. If I could own, here's the thing is what you're talking about is renting, not condos, people who own their
Oh,
apartments.
I know.
Well, no, but when you're talking about apartments, you have to specify that because those are very different
Well,
things, right?
if I said condos, I would have said condos.
Very
I,
true. Very true.
because there is a difference, and then they own the condo, so they're invested. They can do whatever they want to the place. I'm not saying there isn't people who have houses that don't care, but generally, I've encountered like on our street, it's kind of like a big U. I know you saw if you were watching our podcast the other week, you saw a little bit of security footage where my car got stolen, but it's kind of like this U. So we have houses on the outside, we have a pool in the center and some parking on the back wall, and then we have some more, and then we have a line of houses down the middle. And this is all part of we
It's a
kind of
nice, really housing complex
we all
type
kind
of.
of group it and like this is one HOA, I guess. Yeah, we're part of an HOA, but they don't really harass us. I would say we got out pretty good on that.
Well, when they build these communities, they have these certain amenities. That's what's like great about them, right?
Yeah,
Because nobody needs it. Well, some people might like their own pool, but in general, it's nice to have community amenities.
yeah. But from what I found is like the other side of the street, we have more renters, and then on this side we have more owners. And I've noticed that the owners are a lot more, I don't know, friendlier than the renters because they know some of these renters are only there for a year and then they leave and they don't really care. They don't give a shit. They don't take care of the place. They're just in, destroy the place, and leave. And I'm not saying everybody is,
Well,
but that kind
is
of
that even is that even with people who have housing? So it's like even renters who rent houses don't even bother to
yeah,
get to know their neighbors or anything like that.
yeah. Because with my car being stolen, I went to every single house in this little area, and I let every single person know I could, who I got a hold of,
That's actually
informing
such
them.
a great way to like do your community diligence, right? Make sure everybody knows what the
Hmm.
risks are.
Yeah, because our HOA only talks to the owners; they don't talk to the actual people in the house, and that has butted heads a few times. And you know, but that sense of community, like I know everybody on our street. I know whose houses is whose. They all know me. I'm not saying I get along with everybody on the street, but they know who I am and I know who they are and they're a known quantity. And if like something happens, like again, my car getting stolen, it wasn't so much of, bad blood. It was okay, what do we need to do to fix this moving forward in our area?
Right. Well, because that hasn't happened in your area, like basically ever. So this is a new
Yeah.
neighborhood change you have to compensate for because now people's cars aren't necessarily safe just being parked on the street anymore.
So I like the nuclear family, like f- f- what am I trying to say?
With two parents and a kid or more than one kid.
Yes. And generally one or both, I know that's not quite nuclear family, are working, depending on how much they make, and it could be reversed. So I'm technically the stay-at-home dad right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. You get to spend time with your kid this time. Because
Yes,
before you were in the military, you didn't get to spend time with your kid and you missed out.
exactly. And it's pretty good. I'm going to school, so, and I'm doing this. So I get a little bit of free time.
Yeah.
And you have that stability and security that the nuclear family kind of promotes, right? And I appreciate that and I think it's great,
So to
where
you, the nuclear family implies stability and security.
yeah, there's a few other things. So it promotes education, work ethics, I think mutual respect and love, community, communication, responsibility, morals and ethics, and traditions, right?
Okay.
So that's kind of, I think, kind of like I wrote this down before because you mentioned it, so we had a few minutes to write it down. I kind of feel like those are kind of the core nuclear family traits, if you will. And I think over the years it's evolved a little bit to, include gay, bi, lesbian couples, but that kind of support is the family is at its core, right?
Right.
And I don't understand why people are trying to fight against that, honestly.
Uh, this is exactly where I get to have my little 2 cents. So
Oh,
I actually totally agree with you that community is important, and I personally really enjoy holiday traditions. They're something that I really enjoyed. It was really fun to have younger siblings because my mom and I would get to like work on, Easter baskets all night. I would wrap presents with my mom all night. We really cared about holidays and stuff like that. And there is something to say about how maybe our idea of family has evolved to a more mixed, a more blended family. But to me, the nuclear family symbolizes a man and a wife with two kids, and the wife is not ever, they're not ever supposed to get divorced. And it's, there is a, there is many different ways you can interpret things. Like I am very, in our talks, I have indicated that my values emphasize, cooperation, community,
yeah,
kind of a collectivism, right?
yeah,
Which is different than your more individualistic, like politics. However, I don't think that a you need to have a nuclear family to have community, and I don't think that a nuclear family is inherently good. And when people are talking about, oh, the
why?
nuclear family, like in the way that they want to destroy the nuclear family, they're
Mhm.
often talking about regressive gender roles that they want to destroy. They're often talking about the idea that it must be a man and a wife. They are must often talking about the ability, the freedom for people to have divorces. And I personally, you and I are cousins. I personally, the nuclear family is only about a man, a wife, and his two children. The nuclear family doesn't even include grandparents that much anymore.
I
And so to
I
me,
don't like I said, I don't 100% agree with that. Um yes, the old definition, I guess, from maybe the 50s, but we've come a long way since then. And I think
so
the
you think that
nuclear family as a concept has also evolved over time. And I think this is the disconnect we have with people is I'm talking of an updated version where it's, your community, your family, you're taking care of the family, right? And granted, most of the quote traditional nuclear families are between a man and a woman and have kids and are traditionally Catholic or some sort of religious denomination, right?
theoretically, I guess probably, yeah. I hadn't even thought about the religious aspect, but that's true.
Well, that kind of plays a big part in. I mean, in my view of it, it's not essential. I think some spiritualism is necessary to a point, but we're not going to get into that in this episode.
You guys are personally more secular,
I'll
but some idea of religion
yeah,
is not bad.
I'll I'll put it really really simply on what we kind of believe, and this is both for me and my wife. It's we agree with the teachings and what religion can do for you morally and lessons. We don't agree with the organization itself. So, like the church aspect of it,
Mm.
the actual
Well,
organization.
well, you have a big problem with big organizations in general, right? Like,
Just
well, I mean, you
kind
specifically
of,
dislike big government. And so religion is very similar in a way. It's a very specific type of orthodoxy.
yeah, like I said, that's a topic for another episode. But that's kind of what I see as kind of the updated traditional family, right?
Well, so something that I can agree with is the importance of community and trying to raise children to be good people, right?
Yeah,
But I don't know,
and I
not
think
all things that we teach children are what makes them become good people.
well, so here is something I know people don't like talking about, and this is that 10% of children living in a single parent home leads to 17% increase in juvenile crimes. And this is taken from the Heritage Foundation, by the way. So I know I know you come from sort of a single family for a little bit, but you also
Oh,
had
no, no. We have never been a single family
really.
home. um, my mom met my stepdad, and my stepdad had to help my mom get a divorce from my dad because it was so overwhelming because he was a lot, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
I have
I
never
thought
ever
okay.
necessarily been, but there are times when, because my mom was sick, my parents would trade off on taking care of us, but they were both working. Like, I have never ever been in a single family home. However, because we are in a mixed family, and we did not have custody with my dad. So I just moved straight from dad to stepdad. I never had to see my dad again until 5 years later, when he died, we visited him in his deathbed. It was a whole thing. I got to meet my whole extended family on his side. Very touching reunion. My grandmother cried. Um, but
But I think
but my mom is mostly the one responsible for us. So, you know, it's complicated.
yeah. Oh, okay. So your situation is complicated, but you had family to support you most of the time, Would you
Well,
agree
I
with
would
that?
argue that more than a nuclear family, it would have been better if my mom had gotten divorced much earlier. And I am so glad that my mom had so much extended family. I am thankful for how much extended family I have.
Well, our extended family still adheres to the nuclear family, right? I mean, I don't get this whole thing where it's like, oh, I marry somebody, all right, I can't talk to any of my extended family. Fuck them, go away. That's not how this is. The whole reason you have the nuclear family is to start your own family, right? You're still
Well,
connected to everybody else. You don't throw them out in the trash.
our family gets together very often. I talk about other people, they see their extended family every several years.
Well,
Our
yeah.
family in the Midwest, they see each other multiple times a year, the whole extended family. My
So,
mom could go home and all of her like her siblings took care of us for a while when my mom was really, really sick
all right,
when she first got Lyme disease. So to me,
I think we need to explain how big our family is so people get this.
our my mom and Eric's mom
Yep.
are two out of the six girls and seven boys, which is 13 total kids.
Huge, ginormous. But I
And I
also
love it.
think
It's great. I'm sad that we don't have big families
we
anymore.
are too far out to go see them. It's a little bit easier for you. It's not, well, not, no, it's really not. It's not super easy for
It's
you to go
not.
see.
I have I try to go every year. It's 17 hours of travel. It's awful, awful, awful on my body. I physically feel like I'm hit like a bus every single time I come visit them. But I do it because they took care of us when my mom was sick, and I consider them important family members who helped raise me. And
So,
they don't really think of me like that. They think of me as some like weird liberal stranger now that I'm an adult who like must be lazy because I'm disabled. But
we'll have to yell at them to listen to our podcast. Maybe they'll get a better idea of what's going on. But
they
I
won't.
feel,
We were raised differently. It is how it is. But I still love them and I accept all their faults and I understand that they're not. But the more you come see them, the more they're likely to talk to you. They're like
they don't
very
talk to me
spooked.
anyway. All right,
No,
anyway.
no, no, no. The more you come see them, one summer I came out 3 times, barely talked to me the first time. By the third time, they would actually speak to me. They are like the scaredest horses ever. You have to like approach them very quietly. You have to like sit around till they get used to you.
But
You have to sit in the same hotel with them and then come down for breakfast because that's when they speak. They don't. Our family, I love our
they
family so much.
spook easily.
They don't speak. They're the
Oh my
most
gosh.
shy people in the world.
Okay. So
And I am too gregarious.
so here's something though. If you want to like analyze our family, right? Our grandparents, my, our grandpa, World War II vet, right? Did you ever talk to
Mhm.
him about that?
I never got to talk to him much. I've tried to talk to him a few times, and he would just say, I'm just old and waiting to die.
I talked to him a bunch.
I'm glad.
Back when he was still pretty coherent, and he, World War II. He told speak to me a bunch about it after I joined the military, right? Because he was very
Hmm.
proud of me for that. Well, in doing so, you kind of get a sense of like what their family was like, right? And my mom being one of the oldest, I think she's the second oldest of the bunch, right? I think it was Ruth and then her. Or am I missing
Probably.
somebody?
I don't know enough about the specific birth order.
It's too complicated.
I just know Aunt Ruthie is the oldest, and my godfather, Uncle Frank, is the youngest boy-ish, next to my mom. My mom is the youngest daughter, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, I think your mom is youngest. Or it's hard to keep track of 13, all right?
There's so many, and most of them look the same.
Anyway,
I can only distinguish the uncles by who they're married to.
but with that in mind, think of it, these this is the core nuclear family, right? They grew up on a farm. You can't get much more family orientated than that. Everybody, I'm sure, had their responsibilities. Every family member had their responsibilities. Their work ethic was incredibly high. You know, they had that stability where back in the day you could afford that kind of stuff. Well, you could afford the kids, mainly because they were helping out on the farm,
Right.
you know. So that kind of trickled to, I guess, all of us cousins to some extent. Some is a little bit wonkier than others, but the reason we still see each other all the time, and granted, I'm kind of I wouldn't say estranged. I just don't really talk to anybody except for you and a few others. But you
Well,
know,
it's a lot harder to be in contact when we're geographically much further away than the rest of them. You
hmm
and I are both on the West Coast, and they're all in the Midwest, which is just even a different time zone from us.
yeah, and they're all allergic to traveling too, so nobody will go anywhere unless it's via car.
Well, yeah, except for Aunt Ruthie. She would come.
Well, that's one out of a bunch,
Very
but
true.
but even with that, we still meet up regularly, even though our grandma and grandpa are passed away, long gone by this point, but they
Yeah, it's been
still meet up.
almost 10 years. Yeah. It's nice because we have such a big family that there's always a wedding to go to and sometimes now a funeral.
Or in divorce.
Do we have divorce parties though? Because what they do
It
is they get
depends.
together for high
It
school
depends who's at fault.
graduations and weddings.
We had a lot
So,
of baptisms too. That was the big thing for a while.
oh, I missed that.
Yeah.
I must have
No,
missed
you
that
were
move.
you were at them. You were just a lot younger.
Oh, probably. I just didn't know what was going on. I
Yeah,
was
you're
just
just like,
like,
oh,
it's
party.
everybody again.
We getting cake this time? Fun. But I mean, if you want to say it, like our family, and by extension, most of our extended family has those core values, those core nuclear family values. Yeah, we're all doing our own thing, but that doesn't mean we don't, see each other. I don't know who.
A nuclear family, the dictionary definition is a couple and their dependent children. So even before our family did the big get-togethers, mom still at the Heim family reunion, there are those cousins that show up from our parents' cousins. My mom still talks to them. My mom still talks to the extended family. So this is what I'm talking about is the emphasis on just the two parents and their children, not including their parents, not including their siblings, not including all of that, just that. And that is the emphasis on that is to me detrimental to the formation of extended community because I was raised in my community. My parents, we had a lot of people and we had a lot of help. And several of those people included Aunt Ruthie, who she raised her stepchildren, but she didn't have her own children and she never remarried. So she was able to spend the time being involved in the extended family, taking care of people, specifically taking care of me and helping my mom when she was sick and being there for us when we need to. And then there's also, when we lived in New York, family friends who I called auntie, who were also single women who were part of our family union, who helped me with homework, who picked me up after school, who, so to me, the emphasis on a single couple, not a mixed family, not, oh, your stepbrother and your stepfather and your stepmother and all of that, or your cousins. The emphasis specifically on the couple and their dependent children only as an isolated unit, to me, is detrimental to the formation of a greater community.
I don't
You
see.
don't agree,
No, I,
right?
I don't agree because that's not what the morals and everything else supports, right? Yes, that may be the textbook definition, meaning, oh, what is a nuclear family? Okay, but that doesn't give the core values behind a nuclear family, right? So a nuclear family to you is going, okay, bye, family. I'm never going to talk to you again. I'm marrying my wife now. We're going to have 28,000 kids because that's what we do. So that's what you're saying, right? And screw everybody else because that's
I'm
very
saying
contradictory
that
to what the morals are
once you
involved.
have children specifically, parents do not have a lot of time in general, right? Children take up a lot of time. And I think our current iteration of the nuclear family valorizes that, especially with there's a it's not explicit, but there is an implicit idea of a stay-at-home parent who
So,
who takes care of the kids full
yeah.
time.
Yeah,
And
what's wrong with that? What is wrong with having a parent, whether it be the
and
male
there
or
is
the
an
female
emphasis
or the
that
male or the other
there is
female?
an emphasis to me that is interpreted that it is expected to be the woman to do that, to give up her job, because often the finances work out where women just get paid less, and because she doesn't get promoted because they
Ah,
assume she's going to spend that time taking care of her kids. So
if you're
then
going to
when
use
they,
the hold on, if you're going to use the textbook definition, where does that say that in the textbook definition?
well, we're talking about our own
Okay.
interpretations now.
All right.
So that a lot of family members that have a lot of nuclear families that have a parent stay home, it often ends up being the woman because they did the math and her job paid less. And often her job paid less because she's in a feminized field, which specifically pays women is like lesser paying, specifically because once women get into a field, we devalue it, like teachers. And, before men got into computer science, it was like a women's field and it was not paid well. Once women got into biotechnology, that field pay just dropped. Nobody cared about that
What?
anymore.
Okay, that's a little hold on.
Is that untrue?
Here's something for you. If companies could get away with paying women less, why aren't there more women in the workplace in those areas? Why would they pay a man more than a woman?
Well, for
From a
example, why is
business
a maid
perspective,
why
from
is a
hold on,
maid paid
hold
less
on,
than a janitor?
because a janitor also has to fix things. They're also a
Oh,
handyman. They also have to
oh,
do maintenance on a boiler. I'm not saying a woman can't do those things, but then they're not a maid
interesting.
anymore. That's a completely different career field,
Interesting.
right? Because they also have to do the maintenance on the building. That's a completely. I've actually had time in this, not me personally, but I've worked with what you would call janitors, right?
Oh, that's good to know. I really was I really was wondering why it was so differently paid.
Yep, because it's more responsibility. You have to keep track of. Have you ever had to deal with a boiler of a building? Some of these
I'm
things
pretty
are
sure that's
freaking
extremely
ancient.
dangerous.
Yeah. So, it's not just they're going around cleaning up messes. No, they're doing maintenance, right? It's kind of like a full-time handyman, right?
Okay.
You got to be proficient in a lot of different things. And then you also got to know, okay, well, let me take a step back. I'm not qualified to rewire this building's electrical. We need to get a professional in here, right?
Hmm.
But I can flip a breaker and I can go, fix minor things. So that's why, if you think about it, that career field gets paid more than a maid, right? Women also typically choose service industry over corporate world because they want to have a sense of belonging and, like, how should I explain this?
Well, often
More
I
of a
think people
sense of
choose.
accomplishment at their job. And typically that's dealing with people versus men who don't have that same kind of drive and are way more miserable at their jobs than women. So,
Well, so it shows that men do do value those things, are just not taught to value those things. They're taught to value what they can provide financially.
yeah. And nobody said it had to be the man. I know this is kind of just what your view of it is, because I
Well,
think,
because what you have certain people preaching family values, they are very specifically have a very specific idea of what that is. Maybe it's not what your idea of it is,
well,
but they
here's the
have
thing
a
though,
very
too.
clear view of what it's supposed to look like.
I am going to defend this. A lot of times, typically, when you have a child, the woman will want to stay at home to help raise their child. That is a very normal feeling, a very normal thing. And
Right. I think everybody
unfortunately,
wants to be able to be involved in their child's life, right?
yeah. And unfortunately, in today's economy, it's not as practical as it used to be. So, where, yes, before that was kind of the expected norm, nowadays it's a little bit more complicated than that.
I mean, I personally really feel like we should be able to provide for a family with two people working part-time, because a lot of women explain how exhausting being a stay-at-home mom full-time is. And so it would be nice if both parents got to work and have their own like fulfilling career and get to have adequate time with children and have the time off to be able to raise them, versus now it's almost necessary that both people are working full time, and that doesn't leave as much time for children, which is why we have a whole generation of so-called iPad kids, because everybody's too burnt out to raise them.
Yeah,
But
and the TV fills in the blank,
right, because
or the
it
internet
takes,
now fills in the blank, or TikTok right now fills in the blank, and that's not the best. Um, we'll say tools for teaching.
look, I would say that TikTok does have tools for teaching. It's how you use that, but a parent has to be present to monitor media usage and discuss what some child is seeing in order to do that. And most parents are just too checked out to do that. It doesn't matter if you're letting your kid play outside just unattended completely, if you're being a helicopter parent. I mean, I personally support a fair amount of that. I think that leaving your children unattended is good for them. But but I
To
was only
some extent. To some
I
extent, yeah.
well, I mean, I was left alone a lot as a child because my
Yeah.
mom was very sick and my parents both ran a company full time. So, but I was with them a lot. So, like, I got to be in the office doing whatever the fuck I wanted, you know?
I,
Um,
I got to do
it
whatever I
was great.
wanted.
It was great. All of, some of the people who are in my, who I consider people who raised me, like, worked for my parents, and they, my parents owned a real estate company, and some of those people would part-time help me out. They would be friendly with me. When I would visit New York after we moved away, after my mom sold their company, they would still come out and spend time with me just in general, just to catch up, because I consider them family. So, I had one person who was like, I was an extremely difficult kid. And she was like, "Oh, my mom always told me, just wait till you have a kid like you. So I consider this my punishment, trying to help me with my homework." And then being extremely difficult, her having to like reread the math textbook to be like, "All right, what do you got?" Me
Yeah, no,
deleting my
that's
entire Spanish paper.
uh-oh. That doesn't sound
Uh,
good.
it was bad.
But
I don't know what I did with that.
so bringing it back, because you wanted to know why I listen to some of the political pundits I do, because of, I guess, they show, or at least present, similar values to these,
Right.
right? A sense of, mainly, taking care of your family, whether it doesn't matter to me if it's at work,
Or
at
at home.
home, or doing something else, right? But you're contributing in some way to the betterment of your family.
And your family specifically means your children.
Well, and your spouse too.
Your children and your spouse, but it doesn't include Does it include taking care of elderly parents? Does it include taking care of your siblings? Does it
By
include,
extension, they're your family.
by extension, it's implied,
Yes, it's
even
implied.
if they're not part of the quote unquote nuclear family, the family values implies taking care of your family in general.
Yes, yes, and
Okay.
extended family, I guess you could say, right?
Well, I
Maybe not extended, but your immediate family. We'll say immediate family. So
I think
that's
immediate family, but I'm just saying, like, we have a priority on a certain type of family that looks a certain way. And so, of these political people that you follow, do you follow stay-at-home husbands or people who have family values that are maybe a gay couple with kids, raising kids? Hello?
I'm trying to think. Um, well, you could say some YouTubers stay at home.
Yeah, I follow a woman. She's in a gay relationship and she's disabled and she's a full-time YouTuber. And she and her wife just had a baby.
Uh, so one of the people I've what's it called? So one of the people I do follow is John Doyle, and his channel is a political commentary. He's on the right, and he has basically those core nuclear family kind of beliefs, maybe with a little bit more religion thrown in there too. But he makes YouTube videos.
And what does his wife do?
Doesn't say.
So is he maybe making the income and she's a stay-at-home mom taking care of the kids, or is she helping with his business, or does she have her own career?
Couldn't tell you. It just kind of again. I do feel that at a certain point you need to take like it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Does
Well,
it matter?
well, if everyone, if your idea of a nuclear family is this enlightened, any parent can stay home, it can be any configuration of genders as long as it's like a couple raising their kids and caring about their family in general, right? That's what your definition of a nuclear
Yeah,
family is.
yeah.
If all of your political commentators that you follow are one man making the majority of the financial money and his wife taking care of the kids at home, that's a different definition of a nuclear family than the one that you explained to me. And who you follow follows a very different definition of and exemplifies a very different definition
How
of a nuclear family.
how
So I
how
was
does
just
that?
wondering
Okay, hold on. How does that how does that change the definition that I presented to you for the nuclear family?
if you're only following one type of nuclear family, that's the one
No.
that it is.
Again, Ben Shapiro, right? Political commentator. I think his wife is in law. They have their own nuclear family, right? They have a bunch of kids.
Okay, so it's two working parents and two kids.
Yeah. But they still follow those nuclear family ideals.
Well,
At no
I'm
point did
just
I say
curious.
one family member has to stay home.
No, no, no. I was just curious because you included being able to have a stay-at-home dad, and so I was just wondering if you followed stay-at-home dad content or even stay-at-home mom content about things like that, or lesbian or gay couples raising their children together, or non-binary
I
people
mean, I
raising a
know
child.
people personally who do that. Does that count?
Yeah, actually.
So yeah, I know a lesbian couple. They had their kid. Uh it was artificial. They had I guess a very close friend who donated. I'm not going to get crazy into it, but the person who carried the baby said that she would stay home. So then the other one is working still.
So are you in community of them, or do you know of them?
No, I still talk to them on occasion.
Okay, I was just curious. So, to you, they exemplify the nuclear family ideal and and family values.
Yeah. So it's not exclusive to, like I said, a man and a woman. I honestly don't really get out a lot too. I don't really make a lot of friends. All right.
Well, here's the thing is that's why it's nice to follow content of because right now you are getting to be the primary caretaker of your child for this one. And it's a fun thing, but also it can be very isolating to be alone with a kid the whole time. A lot of people that I know, they join parenting communities. They follow, I follow so much different types of parenting content. Okay. I do not have a child and I'm not ever going to get to have a child, right?
Yeah.
But I follow a ton of stay at home moms, people who talk about conscious parenting, authoritative parenting, gentle parenting. Um, Actually, I could, if you're interested in parenting blogs, one of my favorite ones I can send you is on Twitter, and she has, she's autistic and she has two daughters that are autistic, so they have like their own sensory needs, and she talks a lot about like trying to work with them and having a very conscious parenting style, right? So I was just curious if your media footprint included following different types of parenting styles, different types of parenting configurations. I personally don't specifically follow any poly people parenting kids, but
No,
I
I think
see
a-
some out there.
as I
You're very anti-poly.
yes, I'm very anti-poly. Um, one of the stories I specifically know, and it sticks out of my head, was a group of, what was it, five? One girl,
Sounds like a lot.
four men. The girl
Too
got
many.
pregnant, and then one of the men uh, basically put a baby in the hospital
Oof.
because he was upset that she was crying. The girl,
She was
the little
crying.
girl, the baby. Yeah.
Oh, yikes. I mean, that happens with any configuration of parenting that is an abusive parent, an abusive person in general. I don't
But
think
do you
nuclear
think
family exempts somebody from that.
do you think it's more inclined because that's not his kid and he has to go and raise this kid and he
Well,
snaps?
they're in a poly relation. They're in a poly relationship. He easily could have left. That's what's specifically great about poly relationships is that you actually can just
No, I
leave.
okay. We're gonna talk about poly relationships. I think these people don't have any freaking spines. They're just looking to latch on to anything. It's I think what is viewed in the media is not actually how this goes.
I know I have a fair amount of friends that are in poly relationships, and
Have any of them
I
worked?
know here, but have any of the long term relationships worked either? Like
Yes,
to me,
long-term relationships work tons of times.
I am making a face right now. I think it's very complicated, and personally, I don't think that.
I know
I
plenty
think
of normal bi
monogamous relationships.
monogamous relationships. Well, I know gay, lesbian, and normal, I guess, cis, whatever they call normies now, right?
Oh,
A
cis
traditional,
heterosexual,
whatever.
cis
A
heterosexual.
normal relationship.
No, you guys are little freaks, okay?
Anyway, a normal relationship. I know plenty of people that have been happily married for years and years and years and years without any issues. Do you know
Right,
how
and
many
there's.
poly relationships I know that haven't ended in a clusterfuck of atom bombs going off? Since we're talking about nuclear family here,
I mean, I know people
most
who've
of them.
been in poly relationships for a long time, and it's worked out fine. I don't know if like the to me there is multiple different ways you can judge that, but I think what you're trying to say is to you. a poly relationship is the antithesis of family values. Family values necessitates monogamous relationships.
Yes. I think once you start adding another person, A, it makes things confusing, not only for the people involved, but if you, God forbid, you bring kids in this whole thing too, right? How that's
I think it can make
that
things
fucks
more
with kids'
complicated,
heads.
but to me, I know lots of kids who have two-step parents, right? Both their parents remarried. They have four parents. They're all in a co-parenting relationship. But to you, that's fine as long as they're each in monogamous relationships separately, even if it was an extended period of time.
Yes. So it's the like, oh, well, mommy has four boyfriends. Oh, they're all in a committed relationship. I'm talking about this family that I know. Well, I use family in loose, very loose terms. The one woman with the four men, right? Like, how is that not confusing?
Is that any worse than, oh, well, my daddy has a new girlfriend every 3 months. He got married 5 times and they were all terrible to me because they wanted his money.
Yeah, no, that's just as bad because that's not really putting those core ideals of a nuclear family, right?
But those do coincide with monogamy and they fit within the scope. It's not family values, but it fits within the scope of a nuclear family. Your definition of it.
I mean, yes and no, because that person still has their mother to fall back on, right? Or are we talking about their mom getting married a whole bunch of times too?
Yeah, that too.
Then that's not a nuclear family. That
I
basically
just didn't
breaks
want
that
to
nuclear
be
family because
stereotypical.
that breaks the mold. Then
Well,
you're going
so if
to
both
something
parents
completely different.
divorce, if both parents divorce and then they end up having multiple successive marriages, then that's not the nuclear family. If both parents get married more than once, more than twice, like what's your limit?
Well, okay. Are we talking like, oh, this is the fourth girlfriend? Because, okay, if it's a girlfriend, they're not getting married. If it's like, oh, this is my dad's fourth wife, right? That doesn't mean he's not trying to have a nuclear family. Maybe he just doesn't understand the writing on the wall. Maybe he's just an idiot. Maybe he just likes dumb blonde bimbos. But if that's the case, I'm pretty sure he's not following the core values of a nuclear family because some of the core tenets are communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming if somebody is that loose, they're probably cheating or something got messed up along the way.
I mean,
That's
sometimes people just have a certain kind of parent, and so they don't know how to choose a romantic partner that is good for them, right? So if somebody has a parent who exhibits certain behaviors that are
well, there's a certain like
very destructive, right? And that person keeps choosing destructive people.
well, there's a certain mutual respect that goes into it, right? And it's not going to be easy.
Nothing ever is. But well, but those are different things then. I'm just
Maybe the person just hasn't come to terms with themselves, right?
right. I mean, look, I don't know why people choose. I specifically am super not into all that. Um,
And there's nothing wrong with that.
right. And I'm very dedicated to my personal family that doesn't include a romantic partner and two children. So I'm dedicated to my family. I'm just not part of the nuclear family, and therefore I am exempt from quote unquote family values.
No, you can still have family values. You're just not labeled as a traditional nuclear family.
But when people talk about family values, they mean the nuclear family.
Not necessarily, because there's a
But
lot of
that is included in your definition. And look, it's okay. We don't have to agree on this. I'm just saying that these are different things. That having family values doesn't necessitate a nuclear family, and a nuclear family doesn't necessitate having family values, right? They just
yeah,
coincide for you personally.
yeah. I think okay. Let me clarify something too. When I say the nuclear family, what I've been talking about is a successful nuclear family, right? One that I feel we should all try and strive and work for. That's
And
not
what does a successful nuclear family mean to you?
I pretty much what we've been talking about the whole time, right?
Well, does it to you mean the longevity of a relationship or
Yeah.
the personal happiness of every single person involved and their ability to contribute to their community and their self-actualization?
Yes.
The
Both.
first one or the second one?
Both. You can have both of them. A successful. This is a successful one, not a failed one. And
Because
I feel like
I
I need to
think that there's
clarify
lots
this.
of relationships that they were together for 5 years, they ended up having a kid, and they were able to make place separately and both live self-actualized lives and treat their children well. And there are people who have been able to stay together for a long time, and a lot of relationships
Yes, but
have
then
been like that.
that's a non-traditional family.
No, of people who were able to stay together for a long time to keep the nuclear family together that were altogether unhappy and detrimentally affected the kid by being an unhealthy romantic relationship that you show your children.
Then that's not a successful. Okay, yeah. Then that's not a successful family.
So
Period.
both of
Dot.
those would be unsuccessful because if everybody's happy but it was short, it's not successful. If
No,
it was a long term and nobody was happy,
it was successful up until the point where it got destroyed. Then it's not a successful.
then it's a successful blended family.
Yeah, I think we're just arguing
Our, we are
minutia
arguing
and
we
details.
are arguing semantics, but these words have meaning and they matter. And the reason why I asked you this question was specifically for these semantics because what a nuclear family means to you and what a nuclear family means to me are completely different things with completely different connotations, right? To me, a nuclear family means a man and a wife, and they do not necessarily divorce. Divorce is like the end of the nuclear family, right? That that is against quote unquote traditional family values. And I'm not speaking specifically about your divorce, but my dad, because our family, our extended family, our grandparents were Catholic, my dad would say, "You can't divorce me. Your dad won't speak to you again because they're Catholic."
And then that kind of goes into the old way of thinking, where I feel like, you know, it's been updated to modern times, right?
Do you think when
The
politicians
church
are
now
talking about,
considers okay, so if you can have the church consider gay marriages acceptable, why can't we have the definition of a well, slight modifications to the nuclear family?
hey, look, I agree that it's important and we should modify our idea of what a family looks at. I just don't think we need it to be the nuclear family. I think we should update our idea of
Uh-uh.
family. Our
I
family can be,
and
you know, a
I
mom and her sister trying to raise two children because she was abandoned. I don't know. Those are multiple different options for parenting. Um,
yes, and I'm not saying they're bad by any means.
they're
I'm
just not the
just
nuclear family.
yeah, they're just not the nuclear family. And
Right. And you value the nuclear
unfortunate
family
oh, hold on.
specifically.
Hold on. Yes. And unfortunately, when you start getting into situations like this, like a single parent or whatever kind of untraditional family, then you start running into more complicated issues. You start dealing with juvenile delinquencies and other problems that come into with this. I'm not saying
Well,
the
how are you
nuclear
going to reduce
family. Hold on,
juvenile
hold on,
delinquency?
hold
Okay.
on, hold on,
All
hold on.
right. Sorry. I'll
Let
let
me
you finish.
finish
Sorry.
this. This has statistically been proven.
How do you reduce juvenile delinquencies for single moms?
I don't have that answer.
Well,
I really don't.
so there are a lot of things. So some of it has to do with the financial aspects, right?
Yeah.
Remember in one of our last conversations, I talked about how people said, oh, single dads do better than single moms. And it ends up being because single dads make more money than single moms. So they're more able to provide financially for their children. And so the children end up having better prospects. And so the financial aspect is the bigger part of why a single parent home can be detrimental to a child.
Well, also, if you have missing fathers from the equation too, more crime is more likely to happen too. This has also statistically been proven.
No, but what kind of
Yes.
fathers? What kind of fathers? Just
Absent
a father,
fathers.
any father. No, what you need is a good parent. What you need is two good parents. You don't need a
But then
father,
then
any father.
that's not an absent father at that point.
Right, because my brother and I, we had a father present. He wasn't, he tried his best, right? He tried his best, and we literally got the court to say, we don't want you anymore, right? Because he was sick and he wasn't able to take care of himself. And that impacted us in a negative way. Neither of us are able to be self actualized because of that.
But
That is a failed nuclear family, even though our father was present. It's not about just having a father, it's about having a good parent present.
then that
But,
again, that breaks the mold. So
right,
once you kind of start
because the
sacrificing these core
traditional nuclear
values,
family,
yeah,
because a traditional nuclear family does not necessitate both parents are good and able to emotionally fulfill their children. That's a different thing. Having a parent in the home does not necessitate like create a good outcome for kids.
yeah, I'm not
It just
okay. Yeah, I'm saying a successful. Keep in mind, I'm talking about successful nuclear families here. We can talk about unsuccessful ones and outliers all we want. And you can do any
well, but you're talking
situation.
about statistics of outliers of 10% juvenile delinquency, 10% more. That's like so small, especially when you consider
No, that's
that a
a
lot of that is financial.
versus. I'm
I'm
just
just
trying to
saying.
think. Anyway,
So to you, the family values is how well those kids turn out. That matters to you.
to some extent, yeah.
And what are the metrics you're measuring that by?
Human
How well those
decency,
child.
whether they can raise a successful family, whether they're a good person. I, that this is non-quantifiable data, unfortunately.
While you're using juvenile delinquency and
Yes,
maybe
because
jail.
that's a definable metric, right? Stay out of jail. That's a good starter. That's a good, baseline metric.
This goes back into um, do you think there are more people in mental health who do you think there's more mentally ill people in jail or in mental health care?
Probably in jail.
That is correct.
That wouldn't surprise me. All right.
Well, so in your definition, what we legally consider a crime makes somebody a bad person. What if some kid is just really stressed out and starts smoking weed to try to manage their anxiety because they don't have access
I
to
live in
actual health
California.
services?
Weed is legal, so nobody gives a shit.
But we didn't scrub any. I'm pretty sure in all the states that legalized weed, we didn't scrub the records of the people who were previously put in jail or given felonies or
All
offenses
right.
for possession or smoking weed.
So look,
So I'm
I
just saying that your definition, those are different things. Just because somebody's been in jail doesn't mean they're necessarily a bad person. Just because somebody avoided jail doesn't mean they're a good person, right? Like that guy who
but
got
your
off for
parents, your
affluenza.
family should teach you not to break the law. Is that so much to ask? Is that so hard?
Well, okay,
Is
so
that a bad metric?
that kid who got off for affluenza because his parents are rich, right?
I'm not saying oh my god. I'm not saying there's not pieces of shit out there. Look,
Well,
all right.
I'm
I'm
just
going to
saying
summarize. I'm
the
going to
metrics.
summarize. Hold on. I'm going to summarize my values because we're getting late on time, and then you can close with your finishing arguments, and then we'll get going for the day. So, a nuclear family to me is
Actually,
a
wait.
family with
How about I summarize what I've heard from you so far and you summarize what I said?
okay.
All right. So to you, family values means supporting a nuclear family and having family values, which means being a good person, caring about your community, and that a nuclear family's expanded definition includes either parents staying at home if they wish to, two working parents, and or single sex, same sex couples of any configuration, as long as it's two people in a monogamous relationship. Blended families, you kind of include in the idea of a nuclear family, but you don't exactly count it as a nuclear family necessarily.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what I'm getting from you is just because there's quote unquote nuclear families, that doesn't mean that there's issues and problems with it. Along with unconventional families do just as fine as, we'll say, the traditional nuclear family. And that your family may be unconventional, but that's not a bad thing.
I think to me, it was more about how my interpretation of the nuclear family is more reductive, especially when the people I'm hearing say it mean a very specific configuration and not what your definition is. And that I don't think the nuclear family is important to have family values because I also value caring about your family and caring about your community and being a good person. I just don't think they have to be in a nuclear family configuration. We should be prioritizing extended family and community more to be a good person, right? To raise children.
Yes.
So, um, but
All right. And
we hope you have enjoyed our arguing about semantics. Do you
yes.
guys think that we have misunderstood something? Do you guys,
Do you guys
what
agree
is
with our
your,
definitions of the nuclear family, or do you think it's something different?
yeah, what is your guys' definition of the nuclear family? Please comment and let us know. I think that this is a very important discussion to have when we talk about you. You know, we've got the holidays coming up. People do Friendsgiving, people do Christmases. We have
Some people
a
hate
lot.
going to Thanksgiving. They hate talking about these kind of topics, right?
I mean, right, like there's a lot of people who have contentious relationships with their blood family because they are gay or even other politics or problems and have created their own found family unit. But I think what I'm getting at is that it's very important to you how people raise children, right?
Yeah, I think it is.
And I think it is, and I think that our interpretation of how we get people to raise good children is very different too. But I do think that children are a very important part of our society and people should get the chance to raise them, and that we as a community should all be doing what we individually can to make sure that our children, the next generation, turned out better off. I hope everybody has good family holidays and thank you for listening. Have good discussions.
All right. Bye, everybody. Bye.